this video is about me. And I guess I should tell you, this is Dali. I should tell you that the Change Leader collection, the book, the toolkit, as well as the executive program, all follow a 3-step approach, the Change Leader approach. Step 1 is self. Tap into your identity and become a more loving leader. Tapping into your identity, looking inward for direction, getting to know yourself, becoming more self-aware has always been the foundation of the work that I do as a consultant. And it became really obvious to me just how important it is to have that sense of self during a period of change when I went through my separation in 2018 from my marriage. At that point, I realized that doing culture building and culture work is not actually about the tactics and practices and processes that you choose to use. It's more so about leading people through the discomfort of change. I can't lead you through the discomfort of change without having my own internal compass. And you can't lead your team through the discomfort of change without having your own internal compass. So the first step of the Change Leader approach, self, is really the foundational one. When I was writing the book, I laid out the whole structure and the process, and I shared it with an editor, and who's a dear friend, Emily Churchill Smith. And Emily said, "Why would people trust you? I want to know more about you. You know, what's your history? What are your past experiences? What brought you to this place? Like, why would people trust your take here? I need to see more of you. I want to see more of you." And I had a big wake-up call actually the next morning after a session with my therapist, where I realized I just wasn't, there were specific sections in the book that I wasn't allowing my voice to come through on. And essentially, I left that therapy session just being like, fuck it. I'm just going to say what it is that I want to say about being a change leader. And I'm going to say it from my own voice. And I can be completely myself in doing that. And part of being completely myself includes sharing the stories that have brought me to this point. Being honest and open about the experiences that have led me to the place of to this version of me, to the level of self-awareness that I have. So it was important for me that I share stories about me in the book, stories of my becoming. I had a test reader, Maya Toussaint, also a dear friend, who I brought on as a test reader because she's frank, she's open-hearted, I trust her advice, and I knew that she was going to be honest with me about the work, but also about who she thought it was best for. And what she said was, there needs to be some sort of preamble at the beginning of this book that lets people know what they're about to get into, because so much of the beginning is, you know, you in your voice. And I love you and I know you, and so I appreciate it, but not everybody knows you, and they need to understand why this book starts with you. She said, and I love this, that she believed that the reason I was putting so much of me into the book was because I think that in showing you me, that you will better understand yourselves. In talking to you about some of my stories of self-discovery and loss and grief and love and creative exploration of self, that in doing that, I create a space where my hope is that you can also think about yourself and the experiences, the relationships of love and loss and the grief and the learnings, the moments of discovery, the transition periods in your life, your baggage, maybe even your traumas, how all of those things really shape who you are and greatly impact who you are as a leader. So in Change Leader, there are three main kind of stories of becoming that I touch on. There's one that I touch on only briefly, but it is really foundational for me. And that is the fact that as a child, I grew up in the subarctic in a really tiny mining town called Shefferville, which is flanked by two First Nations communities, one Innu and one Niskapi. And I grew up surrounded by exceptionally rich cultural practices and moments of these First Nations communities. Sorry, my cats are having a little bit of a moment. It's not the best timing, dude. And, because I was a white girl in a predominantly First Nations environment, I really learned, or I really recognized my differences and my identity as a white person, and the feeling of being an outsider, but also the feeling of being invited in, the feeling of community, the feeling of belonging. That experience planted the seeds. It is foundational to the reason why I am a culture strategist. It greatly influences the way that I show up to culture building, and it's important for me as a culture builder to share that story and to share that piece about me, because it shapes the way I show up to teams, and it shapes the way I show up to you. Another story of becoming is the story of a nickname that was given to me in 2007, and this nickname became an alter ego actually that I used, and it was the name of my business when I first started freelancing in 2011. The nickname is Ebes Berenstein, and the reason I tell this story around Ebes is because using that alter ego was actually an exceptionally profound experience for me, where I learned so much about creating space for myself, for my individuality. I learned so much about questioning shoulds and expectations. Guys, I learned so much about my individuality, and using that alter ego also greatly shaped the way that I showed up to clients, because I was doing creative direction and essentially marketing communications and strategy at the time, and I needed to know them better. I needed to understand who they were so I could help them communicate more effectively. And what I realized at that point was that what they needed was to tap into their identity in the same way that the use of Ebes and that alter ego had allowed me to do. So I tell the story of Ebes, and I tell the story of tapping into your identity and what I learned through that questioning. My cats right now. I should have just let them out. I thought it'd be cute for the video to have them in here, and now they're going Coco Bongo. The final story of becoming that I share is the journey for me into my consciousness practices. Those really started taking hold for me during the summer of my separation in 2018. I learned so much during that really, really difficult period about change, about discomfort, about returning to your internal compass, about being consistent in the way that you show up to yourself, about being more compassionate, more patient. And that whole experience, as some of you may know, because I've posted about it on LinkedIn, that whole experience resulted in such amazing business relationships and connections for me. It opened so many doors to not to go through the separation, but to be transparent and present to that change, and to be honest with people about what I was going through. I learned a lot about leaning into crisis, leaning into chaos, leaning into change, and then using change as an opportunity to connect with people. So I share that story of becoming in the book. There are other stories in there that are far less about me and much more about my experience with clients, my professional experience, seeing other leaders go through change, lead their teams through change, the bumps of that and the opportunities in periods of change. Those are short stories, but there's some really profound stuff to be learned from how these leaders face change and how they approach strategy. I mean, the fact that they were even thinking about culture at that point was amazing. Anyways, there's some great stories in there. Thank you for being with me on this journey. Thank you for dealing with whatever background noise there is from the cats. Thank you for hanging out with me in my room, and for all the support and encouragement for Change Leader. I really poured a lot of heart and self into this project because I believe that the more I do that, the more room there is for you, for your heartfelt, fulfilling leadership, for your own individuality and experience your own self to show up in your work. And that's not only the most fulfilling experience for you, but it's also the most engaging experience for your team. You're going to build powerful cultures that embrace change when you look at yourself, build a relationship with yourself, understand your own emotional landscape, become conscious to your reactions, and get comfortable in your own growth and evolution. Join the journey with me. Buy the book. If you're more self-directed, get the toolkit. And if you really want to dive in, let's do the executive program together. It's a great program. It's a great program. Okay. Je vous aime. Talk soon.